was far higher consistently. Now I've got one ad that I'll show you, but this was consistent across, I think, at least 4 of the ads. We started to see that. The use of price points and the use of offers. The Chinese community were far more receptive to price points being put in advertising. I'm going to play you a Coles ad, and I think it's probably well travelled. It's got status quo in it, but it's been one of the most successful ads for Coles. But you'll see a distinct difference between the two communities and how they responded to the advertising. And lastly, the use of cultural stereotypes. And it sounds very bizarre and it sounds very simplistic, but if you are looking for access and equality for all, being very mindful of cultural stereotypes in advertising is exceptionally important. So I'll play you the first one, which is the soundtrack processing, and then I'll sort of walk you through. So you can see a distinct difference in terms of the receptivity. For those that don't know, the guy in the ad is at that time was a very famous AFL footballer as well. The other thing that we did also notice is that celebrity, the gradation of celebrity is also very important. You need to actually find someone that is universally recognised. And again, like what we started to find is that in the world of content versus creative, a lot of brands start to use very localised celebrity. But if you're trying to do that to appeal to more individuals, what you end up finding is that there's no recognition of that celebrity, so therefore the recall is sort of far less. So that was a little 15-second snippet of the David Jones. As I mentioned, we tested a Toyota ad, and there were 2 others that had very distinct soundtracks. And a lot of you are probably sitting and saying, this isn't surprising that if I'm newly arrived in another country, there's potential language barriers, that music might be an indication, or I might process music differently from other advertising. So this almost like validated one of the areas that we thought about to begin with. The second component was price points.
Delicious Coles brand sliced ham in a handy 400-gram 4-pack, just $5 every day. Every day? Every day. Every day. Just $5 every day. Every day at Coles.
Has anyone seen that ad before? No? You're lucky. That ran for months. That was about a 9-month campaign with status quo. It was good for the first time, but after a while, it was great. But very, very successful for Coles. But the moment that you start putting price points in is the moment that certain individuals switch off, the conceptual closure moment. Far less of a conceptual closure when you started to look at cultural audiences. Again, I've put 1 ad up. We can put 3 or 4 up. In fact, I'm quite happy to share more examples of this after the presentation for you. Cultural stereotypes. This was a 5 seeds ad. And I think if you think about the creative process, and I'm going to come onto this as well, you probably don't recognise that you're actually putting in cultural stereotypes when you're making the ad. You probably don't recognise it, but when you start to run research like this, you can actually physically see it.
Hello friends, I'm Herbert Jr. I've recently taken over the 5 Seeds business from my father, Herbert Sr. My ideas to make the best cider come from everywhere.
Even his mother.
I found these 2 gnomes in a shed and made them my botanists. And who knows internet marketing better than this guy?
Russian Apple press has arrived. Introducing the celebrado 3000.
Delicious.
So the two, again, like what you can see towards the end is the music response. The other spike from the cultural viewers, and this only happened in here, so I cannot validate it whatsoever, but it seems that the Chinese like cats at computers more than the Australian audiences, but we couldn't validate that, so I haven't put it in the document. But you can start to just very simply see, and I know you are all familiar with a lot of these sort of charts, but you can very much see different cognitive processing against the two. This also then challenged, I guess, how we sort of operated as an industry. So I'm not saying that this was this happens on every occasion, but when you go through the creative process, the question was really, have you thought about your end audience? And have you recruited that end audience accordingly, including gender and cultural biases? And if you haven't, then you're not really testing the ad against all of your target audience. And so actually there's been a lot, I think in the last year and a half in Australia, there's been a lot of conversation around both cultural and gender stereotypes in advertising, and how we can overcome that. The other thing we started to sort of recognise is that the importance of contextual placement started to get lost in planning. We hadn't really thought about culture as something that we needed to factor into how we then looked at communications. And so it really set us on this journey, which was, what do we need to do? Like, how do we then need to look at in-language activity? How does in-language activity potentially change the impact of advertising and the flow of creative? And then finally, and I've touched on this as well, we found a huge difference in the gradation of celebrity that you ultimately picked. So we picked an Optus campaign that had Ricky Gervais in it. There was Jessica Watson in an IBM ad. There was almost a tier of celebrity that was then starting to be recognised by both cultural groups. But the moment you started to try and use an individual who was really sort of systemic or sitting next to one cultural group, then actually the appeal and the attraction was just lost on everybody else. So this is almost like a challenge for, I think, all of us, because what I found is in neurobiometrics, that's really far more exploratory. It's far more sort of trying to get an understanding of what actually is going on around what we're sort of looking at. And yet the majority of expenditure I've found in research is still stuck in validation. It's still very much focused on either validating a preconceived thought and idea, or it's also validating the idea to then take across an organisation to prove that this is definitely the right way forward. Exploratory research being conducted in advertising. And that's a real shame, because right now, our advertising industry needs it more than we've ever needed it before. We have programmatic buying reaching more people than we've ever managed. And we have creative agencies, and this is not a slight on creative, we've got creative agencies struggling to understand how to then connect individually. So what we have is very limited creative messaging being fired out to more people, especially when you then start to look at the cultural nuance of Australia. And this can be applied in every single market. So the way that we plan and the way that we look to go about generating insight in our industry, that's fundamentally really got to sort of shift. And so at Dentsu, that's why we're investing in neurobiometrics. because this is giving us some genuine insight to create a net impact. And so for us, and I echo back to where I sort of started, it's about looking for the small things, and if we look for the small things, we make the greatest difference. And that's really how we've used Neuro in everything that we've done. I don't really have anything more to say, really. Has anyone got any questions?
Questions?